She woke up with a strange heaviness in her chest, the kind that does not come from sadness alone, but from a life that has asked too much of a heart that has carried too many storms. The morning light slipped through the thin curtains, but even the softness of dawn felt distant, as if the world were happening behind a glass she could not touch. She sat at the edge of the bed, holding her breath without realizing it, listening to the silence inside her, a silence that felt like a question without an answer. For months, she had moved through her days as if walking inside water. Everything felt slow, muted, heavier than it should be. She would look at her reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. Not because her face had changed, but because her spirit felt dimmed, as if someone had gently turned down the brightness of her soul. She wondered when exactly the light had started fading. Was it after the last disappointment? Or was it after the 100 small ones that came before, each one carving a quiet hollow inside her? She carried dreams that once felt alive, but now lived like shadows behind her ribs. She could still remember the version of herself who believed anything was possible, the one who woke up with hope humming through her veins. But lately, hope felt like a distant friend she had lost the number of. She tried to reach for it, but her hands came back empty every time. And in the emptiness, a trembling doubt began to grow. What if life wasn't going to change? What if this was all there was? She felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that settles deep under the skin, in the places where faith used to live. She tried to breathe it away, but the ache stayed. She tried to distract herself, but her thoughts kept echoing. People around her saw her smiling, laughing even, but inside she felt like a quiet collapse always waiting to happen. She longed for something she could not name, a sign, a shift, a spark, anything that could remind her she wasn't stuck forever. There were nights she cried quietly into her pillow, not wanting anyone to hear the sound of her breaking. There were days she looked at the sky asking questions she didn't dare speak out loud. There were moments when she wondered if the universe had forgotten her. She didn't blame it. Sometimes she forgot herself too. But in the middle of all that pain, something small, almost imperceptible, kept whispering that this wasn't the end of her story. Deep inside, she felt the faintest pulse of something she could not explain. A presence, a possibility, a trembling intuition that life was preparing her for something she could not yet understand. She didn't know if it was real or if it was just her heart trying to survive. But even the smallest spark becomes undeniable when everything else is dark. She placed her hand over her chest, feeling the rhythm beneath her palm. It reminded her of something ancient, something she once believed with her whole being, that every storm eventually reveals a clearing. She didn't know when or how, but she sensed that something was moving behind the scenes of her life. Something was shifting. Something was awakening. In that fragile moment, she closed her eyes. And though she didn't have the strength to pray, or hope, or dream, she allowed herself one single, trembling thought: maybe the universe wasn't done with her yet. She didn't know it, but this would be the last morning she would ever wake up feeling this way. Because life was about to rearrange itself. The path she could not see was already opening. And the energy she thought she had lost was only gathering strength for the miracle that was coming. A miracle that would change everything. A miracle that would arrive on the day the universe finally answered her. She carried a quiet fear she never admitted to anyone. The fear that life was moving forward for everyone except her. The fear that the days were passing, the months were passing, and she remained in the same place, watching her dreams gather dust on the shelves of her own heart. Sometimes she wondered if she had missed her moment, if her chance to rise had slipped through her fingers without warning. That thought alone was enough to make her chest tighten, as if the universe had placed too much weight on someone who was already fragile. There were mornings when she woke up questioning her worth. Afternoons when she felt invisible even in crowded rooms. Nights when she lay awake replaying every decision she wished she had made differently. Her life felt like a collection of almosts and not enoughs, and the disappointment built its own world inside her. She felt herself withdrawing little by little, protecting her spirit from the next failure she secretly expected to come. She had tried so many times. She had given her heart to paths that broke it. She had believed in promises that never unfolded. She had poured love into places that did not know how to hold it. And each time she tried again, she felt a little more alone in her efforts. Loneliness was no longer the absence of people, it was the absence of being understood. The silence inside her grew louder, carrying echoes of, "Why me?" and, "How much longer?" One afternoon, while staring at a blank page of her life, she whispered a question into the quiet air around her. A question she didn't expect an answer to. A question born from exhaustion, pain, and that deep ache of waiting for something she couldn't name. And yet, something inside her hoped the universe was listening. If you have ever felt this too, you know the ache she carried. She wondered if others ever felt this same weight. That confusing mixture of despair and longing. That strange place where you are exhausted but still hoping, broken but still reaching. If you have ever carried this kind of heaviness, she would want you to know you're not alone. Pain has many shapes, but the heart recognizes every one of them. As she sat with these thoughts, she felt an urge rise within her, a small but sincere desire to speak truth without fear. If this story touches something inside you, if you feel her struggle echo in your own soul, she gently invites you to write one word in the comments: miracle. Not as a command, but as a whisper of connection, a thread between her journey and yours. Sometimes writing a single word is the first step toward opening a new chapter. And as she thought of the people who might one day hear her story, she felt something shift inside her. She imagined a community of hearts walking through similar storms, finding comfort in each other's voices. If her journey resonates with you, she softly encourages you to subscribe, not out of obligation, but out of a quiet knowing that stories like this can hold us together when life feels overwhelming. Let this be a place where your heart can breathe. She also imagined someone out there who might be drowning in silence, someone who needed this message as much as she once did. So if someone comes to your mind, someone walking through a difficult season, she gently asks you to share this video with them. Not to fix their life, but to remind them they're not forgotten by the universe. As she reflected on all of this, the loneliness felt a little less sharp. The ache softened by the realization that suffering is never experienced by one soul alone. Somewhere, someone else is feeling the same emptiness, the same questions, the same longing for a sign. And in that shared humanity, something quiet but powerful begins to bloom. She didn't know it yet, but acknowledging her pain was the first step toward dissolving it. Allowing herself to speak it out loud was the moment the universe leaned in closer. Because pain, when honored, becomes a doorway. And she was closer to stepping through that doorway than she had ever imagined. There were memories she tried to bury, moments she wished she could forget but that returned whenever the world grew quiet. Times when she knocked on doors that never opened, when she offered her best and it was still not enough, when her dreams were met with silence instead of possibility. She remembered sitting alone after yet another disappointment, feeling the sting of rejection wash over her like cold rain. It wasn't just the failure itself that hurt, but the belief that maybe life was trying to tell her she didn't belong anywhere. Have you ever felt this too? She recalled the seasons when she gave her heart to things that collapsed in her hands. A job that ended suddenly. A friendship that faded without explanation. A dream she had nurtured for years only to watch it crumble in a single moment. Each loss carved a new crack inside her, and though she tried to mend herself, there were parts that refused to fit the way they used to. Does this touch something inside you? There were days when she felt unseen, moving through the world like a ghost in her own life. She would enter a room hoping someone might notice the light she was trying to keep alive, but most people only saw the smile she wore as armor. No one knew how deeply she feared becoming invisible. No one knew how much she longed for someone to say they understood. Have you ever carried this kind of weight? She remembered a night she sat by the window watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She wondered if every bright window belonged to someone who had already figured out how to live, how to be, how to breathe without fear. She wondered why her heart seemed to be the only one still stumbling through darkness. The world outside felt so alive, while she felt like she was slowly fading from her own story. There were moments when she blamed herself for not being stronger, faster, wiser. She wondered if the missed opportunities were her fault or simply part of a path she could not yet see. She replayed old decisions in her mind, searching for the mistake that must have determined everything. But each time, she found nothing except the familiar ache of regret. She remembered believing in things that never believed back. Giving effort to places that gave nothing in return. Loving people who only stayed long enough to learn her softness and then leave when things became too real. She wondered why she was always the one left with empty hands. She wondered why her love, her effort, her hope seemed to vanish into silence. There were promises she made to herself that she could not keep. I won't try again. I won't let myself get hurt anymore. I'll stop expecting something to finally work out. But hope is stubborn, and even when she tried to silence it, it would rise in her chest like a fragile flame, refusing to die even when the winds of disappointment blew against it. She had moments of anger too. Anger at life for being unfair. Anger at herself for caring so deeply. Anger at the universe for taking too long to answer her prayers. She would ask into the empty air, why does it have to be so hard? And though no answer came, the question itself exposed just how much she still longed for something better. She remembered feeling lost, not because she didn't know where she wanted to go, but because she didn't know how to get there anymore. The map of her life felt blurred, the road shrouded in fog. She moved forward out of habit, not conviction, hoping one day the path would reveal itself, hoping one day the ache in her chest would ease. And yet, beneath all the heaviness, a gentle truth continued to whisper in the depths of her being, the story was not over. The pain she carried was not a dead end, but a turning point she had not reached yet. But for now, she could only feel the weight. And if you have ever walked through this kind of darkness, then you already understand her more than she could ever put into words. She often felt as if her life existed in two versions, the one she showed to the world, and the one she carried quietly inside her chest. The outer version looked functional, composed, moving forward. But the inner one was made of unanswered questions, old scars, and a longing she didn't know how to soothe. That secret inner life was where the true exhaustion lived, where the fear whispered louder than her faith. Have you ever felt something like this inside you? She remembered seasons when every effort she made seemed to disappear into emptiness. She tried to build something meaningful, only to watch it collapse before it even had the chance to stand. Each failure left her feeling smaller, as if life were slowly shrinking the space she was allowed to occupy. She wondered if other people also felt this strange ache of trying so hard and still watching things fall apart. There were nights when she lay in bed replaying everything she could have done differently. She would go over each moment, each decision, each word spoken or left unsaid. In her mind, she would rearrange the past like pieces of a puzzle, hoping that, somewhere, a different combination could have given her a different life. But no matter how many times she tried, she always ended up in the same place, alone with the truth that she could not change what had already been lived. Does this touch something inside you? She felt a dull ache whenever she saw others flourishing, not out of jealousy but out of wondering when it would finally be her turn. She celebrated their victories sincerely, but deep down she wondered if her own breakthrough had been misplaced somewhere along the way. She tried to remind herself that everyone had their moment, but her heart still carried the quiet fear that maybe her moment had already passed without her noticing. Sometimes she would wake up and stare at the ceiling, feeling the weight of an entire future she couldn't see. She wanted direction, clarity, purpose. She wanted a sign that she was on the right path. But all she heard was silence. Days stretched on with no answers, and she felt like she was holding her breath waiting for something that wouldn't come. If you have ever felt suspended between hope and despair, you understand the place she lived in. She remembered the sting of feeling unchosen. Opportunities she desired going to someone else. Love she offered returning as silence. Moments when she gave her best and still wasn't the one people picked. Each time it happened, she felt a small part of her dim, as if the universe itself had whispered, "Not you." And though she knew it wasn't true, the pain still lingered, shaping her confidence into something fragile. She felt invisible at times, like she could disappear and the world wouldn't notice. She walked through her days offering kindness, love, dedication, yet receiving very little in return. Her heart grew tired from giving so much and receiving so little. She wondered if anyone else had ever felt the weight of wanting to be seen, truly seen, not for what they could give but for who they were. There were moments when the world felt too loud and she felt too small. Responsibilities piled up, demands grew heavier, and expectations tightened around her chest like a rope. She felt overwhelmed by everything she had to be and underwhelmed by what life gave back. And in these moments, she questioned whether she still had the strength to keep going. She often hid her tears, not wanting to burden others with her heaviness. She didn't want to be the one who always struggled, the one who always hurt. So she wore a smile, held herself together, and kept moving as if nothing inside her was breaking. But sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet, her tears would fall freely, carrying the weight of everything she didn't say out loud. Have you ever carried that kind of silence? And yet, beneath all this pain, there was a faint, persistent pulse of something she couldn't name. A quiet intuition that everything she had endured was shaping her, preparing her, calling her into something bigger. But she couldn't see it yet. All she could do was feel the ache of a life she hoped would one day make sense. And if you have ever lived through this kind of waiting, then you already understand her in ways no one else ever has. She carried within her an archive of moments she rarely spoke about, small heartbreaks that accumulated over the years like dust settling on forgotten shelves. There were dreams she once held close, dreams she poured her soul into, only to watch them fade as life pushed her in directions she never asked for. She remembered the version of herself who used to wake up excited for the future, and she grieved the distance between who she was and who she had become. Have you ever felt that gap inside you? There were days when she walked through the world feeling like she was made of glass, fragile enough to shatter with one more disappointment. Even simple words could cut deeper than anyone realized. She carried the weight of old conversations, missed chances, and roads she never took. She often wondered how different her life might have been if she had been braver, louder, stronger. But instead of answers, all she found were the familiar echoes of regret. Does this touch something inside you? She remembered all the times she stood at the edge of her own courage but hesitated, afraid of failing again. Each hesitation added another layer of self-doubt, slowly convincing her that maybe she wasn't meant for the life she kept imagining. She began shrinking her own dreams, making them smaller, safer, less painful to lose. But inside her, a quiet rebellion formed, a tiny spark refusing to be extinguished despite everything. There were moments she sat in silence, listening to the rhythm of her own breathing, wondering why every step forward felt like walking uphill. She questioned why life seemed to flow so easily for others while she struggled to find even one clear path. She wasn't jealous, she was simply tired. Tired of carrying so much without knowing when the weight would finally lift. If you have ever felt lost in your own journey, you understand the heaviness she carried. She remembered giving her best to situations that gave nothing back. She invested time, love, and effort into spaces that were never meant to hold her heart. And each time she walked away, she carried another invisible bruise, one she would hide behind a practiced smile. People saw her strength, but they never saw the quiet tremble beneath it. She wondered if anyone else had ever felt this invisible ache of giving more than life returned. She had learned to survive disappointment, but she hadn't learned how to stop expecting it. Hope felt like a delicate thing, something she wasn't sure she could trust anymore. She wanted to believe that something good was still meant for her, but she feared that life had already made its final decision. These thoughts followed her like a shadow, always lingering, always whispering. Have you ever carried this kind of fear? She remembered moments when she begged the universe for a sign, any sign, to prove that she wasn't forgotten. A word, a feeling, an unexpected moment of clarity, something to remind her that the path ahead still held possibilities. But each time she asked, she was met with silence. And silence can feel like abandonment when you're already holding on to hope by a thread. She felt worn out from trying to rise above things that kept pulling her down. She longed for a moment of peace, a breath that didn't hurt, a day that didn't feel like a battle. She wanted to feel alive again, to feel inspired, to feel connected to something bigger than her pain. But all she felt was the weight of waiting. If you have ever lived through this kind of stillness, you know how heavy it can become. She closed her eyes sometimes and imagined another life for herself. A life where things made sense, where the pieces fit, where her heart didn't feel like an unfinished puzzle missing all the important parts. She imagined waking up with certainty instead of doubt, with excitement instead of fear. And though she knew these visions were just hopes, they were the only thing that kept her from giving up entirely. Deep beneath all the layers of pain, disappointment, and uncertainty, something ancient and steady continued to whisper. Something that told her the story wasn't over, even when she wanted to believe it was. It reminded her that every season of darkness has a purpose, even if it cannot be seen. And if you have ever held on to hope despite not understanding how things could possibly change, then you already know the quiet strength she carried inside her without realizing it. She did not know that the moment her life would begin to shift would arrive on an ordinary afternoon, wrapped in silence, without warning or ceremony. She had gone for a walk simply to clear her mind, trying to outrun the thoughts that always followed her. The sky was pale, the air still, and she felt as though the world had paused for a breath she didn't yet understand. She wandered aimlessly until something caught her attention, a small bookstore she had never noticed before, tucked between two buildings as if it had been hiding, waiting for her. She stepped inside without knowing why. The air smelled like paper, dust, and possibility, a scent that made her chest loosen for the first time in months. She walked between the shelves slowly, her fingers brushing the spines as if she were searching for something she had lost. A sense of quiet familiarity washed over her, like the whisper of a memory she had forgotten. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she felt certain that something was looking for her. Then her hand stopped on a book she didn't remember choosing. It wasn't flashy or decorated, but something about it felt alive, as if it were gently humming beneath her fingertips. She opened it, and the very first sentence pierced straight through her tired heart. It spoke of energy, intention, alignment, and the silent yet powerful connection between a person and the universe. Her breath caught. It felt like the words were speaking directly to her, answering questions she had been too exhausted to voice. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages. The book wasn't simply explaining a concept, it was inviting her into a truth she had sensed but never understood, that her thoughts were seeds, that her emotions were signals, that her energy had the power to shape her reality. For the first time in a long time, she felt something awaken inside her. Something warm. Something hopeful. Something ancient and familiar. She didn't know it yet, but this moment was the beginning of the end of her suffering. As she continued reading, she reached a chapter that spoke of the law of attraction, not as a miracle cure or a magical shortcut, but as a quiet collaboration between the soul and the universe. It described how the energy you send out is the energy that finds its way back to you. It spoke of alignment, intention, and the sacred responsibility of believing before seeing. The truth resonated so deeply that she had to steady herself against the shelf. Another chapter spoke of writing, not as a task but as a ritual. A way of pulling the invisible into the visible. A bridge between the heart and the universe. It said that to write one's desires was to open a door, and to return to those pages daily was to walk through it. As she read, she felt her pulse quicken, as if the universe were gently nudging her toward a new destiny she had unknowingly been calling for. Then she saw it, tucked in the back of the store, placed on a wooden table as though waiting specifically for her, a beautifully bound notebook, simple yet radiant in a way she couldn't explain. The cover seemed to shimmer softly under the warm lights, calling her closer. When she picked it up, she felt an immediate connection. And the name written on the front sent a shiver down her spine, Manifestation Journal. She held it against her chest, feeling something shift inside her, something she had believed was lost forever. The notebook felt like a portal, a sacred container for everything she had been afraid to dream. It felt like an invitation from the universe itself, whispering that it was time to rewrite her story, time to reclaim her power, time to become who she was always meant to be. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep, aching recognition. She realized in that moment that the universe had never abandoned her. It had been guiding her quietly, waiting until she was open enough to hear. And now, standing in that small bookstore, with her hands wrapped around the Manifestation Journal, she felt the first true spark of transformation ignite within her. As she walked out of the store with the book and the journal pressed against her heart, she didn't know what the future held. But she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time, possibility. And beneath that possibility, something even stronger began to bloom, faith. The kind that whispers, even in the dark, that miracles are already on their way. That night, she sat at her small wooden table, the Manifestation Journal resting in front of her like a quiet promise. She lit a single candle, not out of ritual, but because she wanted the light to guide her into this new beginning. She opened the journal slowly, as if unsealing a sacred doorway, and stared at the empty pages that waited for her words. For the first time in years, emptiness didn't feel frightening. It felt like possibility stretching in every direction. She pressed the pen to the paper and closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment to breathe, to soften, to listen. She asked her heart what it truly wanted, not what she thought she should want, not what the world expected from her, but what her soul had been whispering beneath the noise of all her fears. When she opened her eyes again, the words came gently, like water finding its way home. It was the first time she wrote her desires without apology. She began with gratitude, hesitant at first, then with growing warmth. She wrote about the small things she had overlooked, the quiet blessings she had forgotten to honor. And as the ink flowed, she felt her chest expand, as though something heavy were finally loosening. She remembered a phrase she had read earlier that day, "Gratitude is the miracle that keeps the universe in motion." As she wrote it at the top of the page, something inside her shifted. It felt like aligning her soul with the rhythm of the cosmos. She whispered affirmations into the soft glow of the candle. Words she had once been too afraid to believe. She let them roll through her mind, through her breath, through her entire being. At first they felt like foreign language, but little by little her heart began to recognize them as truth. She wasn't begging the universe anymore, she was allowing it to meet her. Then came the visualizations. She closed her eyes and imagined the life she longed for, not as a distant fantasy but as a reality that already existed somewhere in the realm of possibility. She saw herself waking up with lightness in her chest, walking through her days with purpose, feeling supported by forces she could not see but deeply trusted. The images felt vivid, alive, almost tangible. It was the first time she felt the future reaching back to her. In her journal, she described every detail. The home she wanted to live in. The peace she wanted to feel. The opportunities she wished to attract. The version of herself she was ready to become. She poured her soul into the pages until they felt warm beneath her hands, as if absorbing her hope word by word. She also created a small ritual for herself each morning. Before the world could rush in, before doubts had the chance to speak, she placed her hand over her heart and whispered 3 intentions for the day. Not grand declarations, but simple truths: I am worthy. I am becoming. I am open. She wrote them again in her manifestation journal, anchoring them into reality with ink and breath. Gratitude became her anchor. Affirmations became her language. Visualization became her bridge. And every night, she returned to the journal like returning to a friend, tracing the edges of her new beginning with gentle devotion. She didn't tell anyone about this shift. It felt too sacred, too intimate, too new to be spoken out loud. She held it close, nurturing it quietly, like a seed buried in warm soil. She didn't expect immediate change. She just felt grateful to finally have a place where her dreams didn't feel too heavy to hold. And even though she didn't know it yet, those pages she filled with intention were already shaping the days ahead. The universe had begun moving in response to her energy, rearranging paths, aligning moments, preparing miracles she could not yet see. Her life had not transformed overnight, but the foundation had been laid. And something profound had begun to bloom inside her. In the days that followed, small things began to feel different, almost imperceptibly at first, like the quiet shift in the air before a change in the weather. She woke up one morning and felt a softness in her chest she couldn't explain. Nothing extraordinary had happened, yet the heaviness that once clung to her seemed lighter, as if a hidden hand had lifted part of the weight. She moved through her home with a gentler rhythm, noticing details she had ignored before, the way sunlight touched the floor, the comfort in the warmth of her tea, the quiet peace in simply breathing. She started noticing patterns too. Little coincidences that felt intentional, almost like the universe was whispering back to her. She would think of someone she hadn't spoken to in months, and they would message her that same afternoon. She would visualize a solution to a problem, and unexpectedly, the answer would present itself without effort. These weren't grand miracles, but they stirred something deep within her, a recognition that life was beginning to respond to her in ways she had never experienced before. One morning, while writing in her manifestation journal, she felt a sudden wave of clarity wash over her. It was as if the fog that had clouded her thoughts was finally lifting, revealing truths she had always known but somehow forgotten. She realized that the journal wasn't just a notebook. It was a mirror. A guide. A bridge between her inner world and the life she was stepping into. She pressed her hand to the page and felt a quiet certainty rising in her. Little signs began appearing everywhere. A stranger smiled at her in a way that felt meaningful. A random quote aligned perfectly with the thoughts she had written the night before. A song played with lyrics that answered a question she had been holding in her heart. She could no longer dismiss these moments as coincidence. They felt like alignment. They felt like the universe whispering yes. There were moments when she caught herself smiling for no reason. Times when she paused and felt a presence surrounding her, not physical, but energetic, as if something greater was walking beside her. She felt guided. Supported. She felt, for the first time in a long time, that she wasn't facing life alone. Each sign, no matter how small, deepened her trust. She also began receiving intuitive nudges, gentle, persistent thoughts that encouraged her to take small steps forward. Reach out to someone. Say yes to a new idea. Try something she had been afraid to try. These nudges didn't feel like random impulses. They felt like direction. And each time she followed them, something beautiful unfolded. She found herself becoming more aware of her emotions, her energy, her thoughts. She no longer felt like a passenger in her own life. She felt engaged, present, connected. When she felt anxious, she returned to her journal. When she felt lost, she visualized. When she needed comfort, she turned to gratitude. And each time she did, the universe seemed to answer a little quicker. There was one particular morning when she stepped outside and felt the breeze brush gently against her face. For a moment, everything around her felt aligned, the sound of distant birds, the scent of the air, the warmth of the sun. It felt like the world itself was speaking directly to her. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet thank you, feeling it resonate far deeper than she expected. She knew she was still at the beginning of her transformation, but the signs were undeniable. Something was shifting. Something was awakening. Something was moving in her favor, slowly but unmistakably. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was starting to align exactly as it should. If you feel this energy reaching you too, if these words touch a place inside you that has been waiting for change, she gently invites you to write in the comments, "I receive." This simple phrase may be the doorway to your own unfolding. And deep within her, a truth she had long forgotten finally returned. Life was beginning to rise to meet her. The universe was responding. And this was only the beginning. The shift from subtle signs to real changes happened quietly, as if life wanted her to ease gently into the new chapter unfolding before her. One morning, she woke with a sense of clarity so strong it startled her. The questions that once tangled in her mind felt lighter, easier to navigate. It wasn't that all the answers had arrived, it was that her fear of not knowing had softened. She could finally breathe again, and the simple act of breathing felt like a small victory. Opportunities she once thought were beyond her reach began appearing in unexpected ways. A message arrived from someone she hadn't spoken to in years, offering her a chance she had long given up on. A conversation that seemed casual at first revealed itself as a doorway to something new. She felt the universe rearranging things, aligning people, moments, and possibilities with a precision she couldn't ignore. It was as if life had been waiting for her energy to shift before it revealed what had always been meant for her. Even her emotions felt different. The heaviness she used to carry like a second skin began to loosen its grip. When discouraging thoughts appeared, they didn't stay as long. The sadness that once lingered for days now passed through her like a visitor instead of a permanent resident. There were moments when she stopped in the middle of her day, surprised by a quiet wave of peace that washed over her unexpectedly. She found herself making decisions with more confidence. She no longer needed to overthink every step or rehearse every outcome. Something inside her had awakened, a knowing, an inner guidance she trusted more than she trusted her fear. The future didn't feel like a threat anymore, it felt like a landscape she was beginning to shape with her thoughts, her intentions, and her renewed sense of worth. Small opportunities turned into meaningful ones. Someone recommended her for a project she hadn't even applied for. She received messages from people who were drawn to her energy without understanding why. She felt seen in ways she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't fame or attention she was after, it was the simple affirmation that her presence mattered, that her voice had value, that the world had space for her after all. Her manifestation journal became a map of every shift. She would write her intentions at night and wake up to moments that mirrored them. Words she wrote with trembling hope began to echo back into her days as lived experiences. It was as though the journal was stitching the inner world to the outer one, aligning her desires with the life unfolding around her. She noticed herself speaking differently too. Her words carried softness instead of fear. Gratitude instead of despair. Possibility instead of limitation. It was a language she had forgotten, one she was finally learning to speak again. People around her noticed the change, even if she hadn't said anything about her transformation. They felt it in her presence, her energy, her confidence. And with each step forward, her faith grew. Not blind faith, not desperate faith, but a grounded, steady trust that something bigger was guiding her. A trust that every struggle she had endured was leading her to this moment. A trust that she was no longer walking alone. She began to understand that transformation doesn't always arrive in fireworks. Sometimes it begins with a single breath that doesn't hurt anymore. A single moment of peace. A single yes from the universe. And those small moments were now gathering around her, forming a path she was finally ready to follow. As her life began to change in real, tangible ways, she felt something settle inside her, a calm certainty that the shift wasn't temporary. This time, the change was real. This time, the foundation was strong. This time, she wasn't watching life happen to her, she was participating in the miracle of it. A miracle that had only just begun to unfold. Her world widened in ways she never expected, not through loud breakthroughs, but through a steady, growing alignment that touched every corner of her life. She woke each day with a new sense of purpose, as if the universe were gently guiding her from within. The confusion that once clouded her path now felt distant, like a storm she had finally walked out of. She was still learning, still healing, but something inside her had awakened, something she could no longer ignore. There were moments when she caught herself pausing, simply to savor the feeling of being alive again. She would sit with her morning tea and feel an unfamiliar calm settle into her bones. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing through her days or bracing herself for disappointment. She was allowing herself to exist with softness. She was allowing herself to experience life instead of just surviving it. And that shift alone felt like a quiet blessing. People around her noticed the change before she fully understood it. Friends who hadn't seen her in months said her voice sounded lighter. Strangers seemed drawn to her presence, offering smiles, kindness, small gestures that once felt rare. It was as if her inner world was finally beginning to reflect outward, creating a harmony between who she was and who she was becoming. Ideas began flowing to her effortlessly, like gentle waves washing onto a shore that had long been dry. She felt inspired in ways she hadn't felt since she was a child, dreaming of endless possibilities. She found herself writing more, imagining more, believing more. She no longer questioned whether she was capable. She simply allowed herself to create, without judgment, without restraint. There was a moment she would never forget, a quiet evening when she opened her manifestation journal and saw how many intentions had already begun taking shape. She ran her fingers over the ink and felt a rush of gratitude so deep it almost brought her to tears. It was in that moment that the truth settled fully into her heart. She was no longer waiting for life to change. She was participating in the change with every thought, every intention, every breath. Her inner voice, once drowned by fear, had become a steady, reassuring guide. It whispered to her in moments of doubt, reminding her of her resilience, her worth, her power. And each time she felt lost, she closed her eyes and repeated softly, "Today, I choose to believe." These words became her anchor, her compass, her gentle promise to herself. She no longer felt like life was happening without her. She felt connected, deeply, profoundly connected, to something greater. She saw the world differently, not as a place that demanded constant struggle, but as a living, breathing field of possibility. She realized that her thoughts mattered, her energy mattered, her presence mattered. Her confidence grew quietly, naturally, like a flower opening to the sun. She didn't force anything. She didn't chase anything. She simply aligned herself, one intention at a time. And in that alignment, life began offering her opportunities she once believed were out of reach. She felt supported by the invisible, guided by intuition, fueled by a sense of purpose she had never fully experienced. And as the days unfolded, she began to trust that this wasn't temporary. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. This was awakening. A deep, inner awakening that would carry her into a life she once thought she was unworthy of. A life she was now ready to claim. Her transformation deepened as if life were slowly revealing a version of her she had forgotten existed. She moved through her days with a grace she didn't have to force. It wasn't confidence in the traditional sense, it was something quieter, something sacred. A sense of belonging to her own existence. She no longer felt like a visitor in her life. She felt rooted, grounded, connected from the inside out. The world around her began to look different too. Colors appeared richer, conversations felt more meaningful, and the smallest moments carried a sense of magic she once believed only belonged in stories. She found beauty in places she had never paused to notice: sunlight reflecting on a window, the sound of distant laughter, the peaceful hum of the night. Life was no longer something she endured. It was something she felt herself participating in fully. Her intuition grew stronger each day, guiding her with a certainty she could not explain logically but trusted completely. When she felt drawn towards something, she followed. When a situation felt heavy or misaligned, she stepped back without guilt. She no longer forced herself into spaces that drained her. She honored her energy, and in doing so, she attracted experiences that reflected her new inner state. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the healing she didn't know she needed, gratitude for the peace she once believed was impossible, gratitude for the alignment that now shaped her path. She understood now that gratitude wasn't just a practice, it was a vibration, a language, a bridge between her heart and the universe. She continued returning to her manifestation journal, each entry carrying the delicate balance between who she was and who she was becoming. She wrote about her dreams, her intentions, her breakthroughs. She wrote about the moments of clarity that arrived like whispers. She wrote about the days when everything made sense and the days when nothing did. And each word helped build the foundation of the life unfolding around her. The more she aligned with her inner truth, the more life expanded around her. New connections appeared, almost effortlessly. People who uplifted her journey, who inspired her with their presence, who created conversations that felt like sunlight entering a room. She felt supported in ways she had never felt before, supported not by circumstance, but by energy. There was a night when she looked at her reflection in the mirror and finally saw herself, not the broken version, not the exhausted one, not the one defined by fear. She saw the woman she had always hoped to become. Radiant, present, rising. And as she placed a hand over her heart, her voice emerged as a soft whisper: "Today, I choose to believe." The words echoed within her like a vow, a sacred commitment to keep walking toward the life she felt growing inside her. Her dreams no longer felt distant. They felt near, almost touchable, as though the line between imagination and reality had begun to fade. She felt aligned with her purpose, aligned with her heart, aligned with something greater than anything she had ever known. And with every breath, every intention, every step, she felt the awakening within her expand. It wasn't just a chapter. It was a rebirth, a return to the truth of who she was always meant to be. Her life was no longer defined by what had happened to her. It was defined by what she was choosing now. And she chose belief. She chose alignment. She chose the miracle she could feel forming just beyond the horizon of her becoming. Her life began to stretch in directions she once believed were unreachable, as if the universe had been quietly holding doors open, waiting for the moment she felt worthy enough to walk through them. Opportunities that once felt distant now unfolded naturally, almost effortlessly, as if they recognized her before she recognized herself. Each day carried a new possibility, and she greeted them not with fear, but with a soft, steady confidence she had never known before. There were mornings when she awoke with ideas that felt alive, pulsing with potential. She no longer dismissed her inspirations as unrealistic fantasies, she treated them as invitations. She allowed herself to dream bigger, to imagine more boldly, to receive visions of a life that reflected her deepest desires. The woman who once shrank her dreams to fit her fears was now expanding them to match her worth. Her work transformed too. What once felt heavy and draining began to feel purposeful, even sacred. Creative ideas flowed through her as though the universe were speaking directly to her through flashes of insight. She found herself attracting projects, connections, and opportunities perfectly aligned with her new vibration. It wasn't hustle or luck, it was alignment, pure and powerful. The manifestation journal became the heart of her evolution. She wrote in it every day, sometimes twice a day, letting her future self speak through her present self. Each word she wrote felt like stitching her dreams into reality, forming threads between what she desired and what she was becoming. She could feel the energy of her intentions deepening, growing roots, taking form. The journal was no longer a tool, it was a companion, a portal, a sacred witness to her unfolding. Emotionally, she felt fuller, more grounded, more connected, more alive. The emptiness that once hollowed her out was now replaced with abundance. Not material abundance alone, but emotional abundance, peace, confidence, clarity, trust. She found herself listening to her heart with the reverence of someone who had finally understood its value. Her intuition wasn't just a whisper anymore, it was a steady voice guiding her gently but firmly toward her highest path. Her relationships transformed as well. She attracted people whose presence felt like alignment. People who saw her light and didn't dim it. People who encouraged her growth instead of fearing it. Conversations became deeper, more meaningful, more expansive. She no longer settled for connections that drained her spirit. She only welcomed those that mirrored her new frequency of abundance and truth. There were moments when she paused in awe, realizing how far she had come. A life that once felt stagnant was now blooming with possibility. A heart that once felt fractured was now whole, radiant, open. She looked around and saw evidence of her inner transformation reflected everywhere, in her emotions, in her circumstances, in the opportunities arriving at her feet. It was as if the universe were saying, "This is who you were meant to be all along." She stopped resisting her own greatness. She allowed herself to want more, to receive more, to become more. Not from ego, but from alignment. Not from desperation, but from destiny. She finally understood that the universe wasn't withholding her desires, it was waiting for her to rise into the version of herself capable of holding them. Every day felt like a continuation of a miracle still unfolding. She was stepping into a life she once thought was reserved for other people. A life she now realized had always been waiting for her. A life she was ready to claim fully, deeply, unapologetically. And beneath it all, she carried a glowing awareness: this wasn't the peak. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of the expansion her soul had been calling for all along. Her dreams no longer felt like fragile hopes she was afraid to touch. They felt real now, tangible, as though the universe had begun weaving them into the fabric of her everyday life. She could feel them approaching, not with force, but with a quiet certainty, like a sunrise she could sense even before the first light touched the sky. The life she once feared was impossible was now unfolding with a grace that felt breathtaking. She began receiving opportunities that aligned so perfectly with her desires that she often paused to absorb the magnitude of what was happening. Invitations arrived that matched the visions she had once written timidly in her manifestation journal. People she admired reached out. Projects she had only dared to imagine began falling into place with uncanny precision. It was as if the universe were saying, "I heard you. I always heard you." Her energy shifted in ways she could not deny. She walked differently. She spoke differently. She showed up differently. Not because she was pretending, but because she had finally stepped into the truth of who she was. The doubt that once shadowed her every thought now felt distant, like a chapter she had finally finished reading. She no longer questioned whether she was worthy of her dreams. She felt it, deep in her bones, deep in her breath, deep in her becoming. The manifestation journal became a symbol of everything she was creating. Every page held evidence of her transformation. She wrote about the signs, the synchronicities, the breakthroughs. She wrote about her gratitude, her alignment, her unfolding. And every time she looked back at earlier entries, she saw the bridge between her old life and the new one she was stepping into. The journal wasn't just a record, it was a map of her soul's expansion. Emotionally, she felt richer than she ever had. Peace became her default state, not a rare visitor. Confidence felt natural, not forced. She found herself embracing abundance in all its forms, abundance of joy, of connection, of ideas, of energy. She no longer measured her worth through struggle. She measured it through alignment, through the way her life responded when she honored her truth. Her professional life blossomed as well. Doors opened that once seemed locked. She received recognition she had once quietly prayed for. Opportunities expanded beyond what she believed herself capable of attracting. But the most beautiful part was that she no longer chased success, she attracted it. Her energy carried a clarity and calmness that drew the right people and the right paths toward her with magnetic ease. She began trusting herself deeply, her instincts, her desires, her direction. She didn't feel the need to justify her dreams anymore. She lived them. She embodied them. She radiated them. And the universe responded with even greater abundance, as if rewarding her for finally stepping into alignment with her own essence. Her relationships evolved in profound ways. Some people drifted out of her life naturally, as though their purpose in her story had already been fulfilled. But new connections arrived that felt like soul recognitions, people whose presence amplified her growth, whose words reflected her truth, whose energy mirrored her expansion. She felt surrounded, supported, uplifted. And through it all, she felt an inner certainty that everything was unfolding exactly as it was meant to. She no longer feared the unknown. She welcomed it. She trusted it. The unknown had become a canvas rather than a threat, a place where her future was being painted with intention and grace. There were moments she would close her eyes, place her hand over her heart, and breathe in the fullness of her life. She could feel the shift, the abundance, the miracles. She could feel her alignment stretching far beyond what she once believed possible. And with every breath, she felt her dreams moving closer, no longer distant visions, but realities being shaped by her energy, her faith, her becoming. She knew now, without hesitation, that she was stepping into the greatest chapter of her life. A chapter defined not by struggle, but by expansion. Not by fear, but by alignment. Not by longing, but by receiving. The universe was not only answering her, it was elevating her. And she was finally ready to rise into everything she had always been meant to be. Her rise into alignment became so natural, so steady, that she almost didn't notice when the world began to notice her too. It started with small acknowledgments, gentle affirmations from people who had witnessed her shift from a distance. Someone messaged her saying her presence felt different, brighter. Another person thanked her for inspiring them without even realizing it. These words reached her heart in ways she couldn't explain. After so long feeling unseen, she was finally being reflected back to herself through the eyes of others. Then the invitations began. At first, they felt surreal, requests for collaboration, offers to share her story, opportunities to speak about the transformation she had once believed no one would understand. She accepted each one with humility, not because she wanted recognition, but because she wanted to honor the path that had brought her here. The same journey that had once felt heavy now radiated with purpose. People began saying they could feel something in her, an energy, a frequency, a grounded confidence that resonated deeply. They told her she had a light in her voice, a calm in her presence, a wisdom she carried without trying. She was no longer the woman who walked through life apologizing for her dreams. She was living in a state of alignment so strong that others could feel it simply by being around her. Her transformation was no longer an internal shift, it was a ripple touching the world outside her. She found herself speaking openly about things she used to hide. Her struggles. Her fears. Her healing. Her awakening. And every time she shared a piece of her story, someone else said, "That's exactly how I feel." What she once believed was her private pain had become a bridge to others. Her journey became a mirror for people who were still walking through their own darkness. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, heard, valued. One day, she stood on a small stage, speaking softly to a room of people who had come to hear her story. The memory of her past fears flickered through her mind, but something inside her remained steady. Her voice did not shake. Her heart did not tremble. She spoke with the clarity of someone who had lived every word she shared. And when she finished, the room rose to their feet, not for the speech, but for the healing, the honesty, the light she carried. She received letters from people she had never met, telling her that something she said, something she wrote, had changed their lives in small, beautiful ways. She read each message with tears of gratitude, realizing she had become the kind of person she once needed. Her story was no longer just hers, it belonged to everyone who saw themselves in her journey. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, not from recognition, but from resonance. She wasn't chasing applause. She wasn't seeking validation. She was simply living her truth, and truth has a way of drawing the world closer. Every time she touched another heart, she felt the universe whisper, "Keep going. This is where you belong." As she continued to rise, she held on to humility like a compass. She knew that the beauty of her journey wasn't in the praise she received, but in the transformation she embodied. She carried gratitude with her in every conversation, every interaction, every new opportunity. She felt honored, not because the world finally saw her, but because she finally saw herself. And if her story has touched you, even in the smallest way, she gently invites you to leave a comment, not out of obligation, but as a way of affirming your own path. And if you feel called, she softly encourages you to subscribe, so these stories of healing and transformation can continue finding you at the right moments, just like this one did. Her recognition wasn't the end of her journey. It was a reflection of her alignment. A sign that she was becoming exactly who she was meant to be. And the universe was responding, once again, with undeniable grace. Her life, once shaped by doubt and quiet suffering, had become a living testament to transformation. She no longer walked with the weight of yesterday clinging to her steps. She moved with presence, intention, and a softness that came from knowing she had survived every season meant to break her. Her story had not unfolded in the way she once imagined, but it had unfolded in the way her soul needed. And as she looked back, she understood that every unanswered prayer, every delay, every silence from the universe had been leading her here. There was a morning unlike any other when she sat with her manifestation journal open before her, reading the words she had written on the first day of her awakening. She felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sadness, but from reverence. She realized she was no longer writing from longing, she was writing from alignment. Her desires were no longer distant dreams, they were becoming her lived reality. The journal that once carried her pain now carried her evolution. She stepped outside and felt the air wrap gently around her, warm and familiar. The world felt different, not because it had changed, but because she had. What once felt overwhelming now felt possible. What once felt out of reach now felt natural. She could sense the divine orchestration in every moment, every breath, every step. She was not hoping for miracles anymore. She was living inside them. Her heart felt open in a way she never believed possible. Not fragile, not uncertain, open with trust, with gratitude, with a deep knowing that she was guided. She finally understood that the universe had not delayed her blessings, it had prepared her to receive them. It had strengthened her, softened her, expanded her. Everything she had walked through had shaped her into the person capable of holding the life she now stepped into. There was a quiet moment when she placed her hand over her heart and whispered her truth into the silence. She was no longer the woman waiting to be chosen by life. She was choosing herself. She was choosing alignment. She was choosing faith. And the universe responded with a clarity that echoed through every part of her being. She thought of all the nights she had cried, believing she was forgotten. She thought of all the mornings when she forced herself to rise despite the heaviness in her chest. She thought of the moments she almost gave up. And she wished she could go back and hold that past version of herself, whispering what she knew now: the miracle was coming. It had always been coming. She just needed to stay long enough to meet it. As she stood in the quiet beauty of her new life, she felt a wave of compassion for anyone still walking through the darkness she once knew so intimately. She wanted them to understand that transformation never happens all at once. It begins with a single breath, a single intention, a single moment of choosing not to give up. And if you are hearing her story now, it is not by accident. You were meant to receive this reminder. The same power that shifted her life lives inside you. The same light that rose within her is waiting to rise within you. The universe is not distant, it is listening. It is responding to your energy, your intention, your faith. And no matter how lost you feel today, your miracle is already making its way toward you, gathering every piece of your destiny with deliberate grace. So if her story touched something inside you, she gently invites you to comment a single word that opens the door to your own transformation, miracle. If her journey awakens something in your heart, she softly encourages you to subscribe, not for her, but for yourself, so that stories like this continue arriving exactly when your soul needs them. If someone you love is struggling, she invites you to share this video with them, as a small act of compassion and connection. And if you feel gratitude stirring inside you, she welcomes you to leave a gesture of gratitude in the comments, anchoring your intention into the universe. Because this is not the end of her story. And it is not the end of yours. Both of you are still becoming. Both of you are still rising. And the universe, patient, generous, listening, is already preparing the next miracle.